Today we'll talk about an introduction to depression and recovery. Depression um, is known to some large extent by people, but depression involves a low mood, sadness. Um, it can involve boredom, low motivation. Sometimes it presents with a lot of physical complaints. Um, There's people having pain, stomach aches, headaches. Sometimes we call that a somatic depression. Tearfulness, crying, slowed down thinking, low energy level, feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness, suicidal thoughts, suicidal plans, deprecation, thinking negatively about oneself, putting oneself down, looking at life as if there's black lenses, everything looks dark and dreary, negative thinking, not able to see anything positive, pessimistic thinking. And then there's what we call vegetative signs and symptoms. It's the physical signs: problems sleeping, problems eating, problems with energy, problems with sex drive, and all of those things occurring together over a 2-week period of time, often longer. Can be mild, moderate, severe. Sometimes when it's really severe, people will even have psychotic symptoms, hallucinate, have voices. In the severest form, they might have command hallucinations telling them to hurt themselves or others, take their life. A milder, long-term form we call dysthymia, where people have a milder depression that goes on for even a couple years. It's kind of like a double pneumonia, which is like major depression, versus a walking pneumonia would be like a dysthymic disorder. A lot of people may have dysthymia and not even recognize it. It just robs them of joy in life. And there certainly are some genetics behind it, or it runs in families. Some people are more vulnerable to it. And when it comes to addictions, there can be a lot of self-medicating that goes with it. Alcohol might be an issue to get some relief, or stimulants, cocaine, PCP, Molly, various substances, just to get some relief and escape from the pain of depression, which is quite severe. Treatments for depression, we'll talk just briefly today about medical treatments. The original antidepressants, the MAO inhibitors, which block an enzyme that breaks down neurotransmitters so that they build up, were initially discovered in the days of TB hospitals. When people had TB, they'd be placed out in the country in hospitals to isolate them so they wouldn't spread TB. And when they first were finding medicines to treat it, they found that when they treated the people, the medicines didn't necessarily eradicate the TB, but the people started feeling better. They started eating better, their appetite improved, their energy improved, and their mood improved. And at first they thought that they were eradicating the TB, but they found on x-rays they had TB just as bad as ever, and the observations were that they were actually treating the depression these people were in. And that led to the discovery of the MAO inhibitors like Parnate and Nardil. And they're still some of the most effective antidepressants, although they interact with other medicines and things in people's diet, tyramine, an amino acid in diet, that can cause a hypertensive crisis, which could lead to stroke if people aren't on top of it, and so they aren't used as often, but they're still very effective antidepressants. Then the tricyclic antidepressants like Elavil, amitriptyline, imipramine, tofranil, nortriptyline, some of the classic ones that aren't used as much, although still very effective. They have more side effects and they're more broad spectrum. They work on several neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters have to do with things like norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, but some of the older antidepressants also had other effects on like acetylcholine, blocking acetylcholine, and antihistamine side effects, and weren't as pleasant to take, had to be adjusted slowly so the body could get used to them, and sometimes it took several weeks of adjusting the dose before you could even get an antidepressant effects. Interestingly, our antidepressants, as most of our psychopharmaceuticals, have a backbone made up of diphenhydramine or Benadryl, and adjustments made to that molecule. Diphenhydramine itself is a blocker of the reuptake of serotonin, which when Prozac came on the market back in the early 80s, that was a real step forward in antidepressants because it was a selective blocker of the reuptake of serotonin. And by selectively blocking the reuptake of serotonin, it got rid of a lot of side effects from antidepressants. And so Prozac or fluoxetine, Zoloft or sertraline, Paxil or paroxetine are some of the selective serotonin uptake inhibitors. We've got Celexa, citalopram, Lexapro, and then we came along dual selective blockers such as Effexor, where it selectively blocks serotonin and norepinephrine. Cymbalta is another one, Pristiq, and by selectively blocking norepinephrine along with serotonin, it gives it another couple properties. One, it helps for anxiety, but also it helps for pain, even independent of depression. It does that by raising the pain threshold in the nervous system. Chronic pain wears down the chemical equilibrium in the pain center of the brain, and people get super sensitive to pain. And so on these type of medicines, Cymbalta being the prototype of this, restoring the chemical balance of serotonin, norepinephrine, particularly in the pain center, it raises the pain threshold and helps for pain management in that way. Then we have Wellbutrin, which is more selective to dopamine, blocking reuptake of dopamine. And there are often people who have tried several SSRIs, selective serotonin uptake inhibitors, and may have tried some of the SNRIs, selective norepinephrine serotonin uptake inhibitors, but have not tried something like Wellbutrin. And often when they haven't responded to some of the others, that may indicate that they will respond to something like Wellbutrin. At least that's a place to start at that point. So that's just a very quick overview of the early antidepressants and some of the newer antidepressants. Many people have what's called refractory depression. It doesn't respond to initial treatment with an antidepressant, and they need to try more than one, and sometimes they need to try a combination of antidepressants that work by different mechanisms. Sometimes they need to have augmentation with some other agents added to the antidepressant, especially if they're only having partial responses. And we'll get into talking about that another day. Thank you.